Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68. Illinois has won back-to-back games for the first time in over a month as they go to Minnesota and deliver a blowout victory and now come back home and knock off UCLA despite their best efforts to blow a 16-point lead in the final 5 minutes. But back-to-back wins for Illinois, 17-8. Back to 9-6 in conference, and some major changes and major developments to talk about across those two games, and of course a big time rematch coming up on Saturday against Michigan State, one that has been highly anticipated since that game in East Lansing about a month ago. We will talk about all of that on this episode. I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And Mike, are the Illini officially back?
Oh man, like we came on here a couple days ago getting everything off our chest, ranting for 30 straight minutes, and now you win 2 games in a row and it's joyous and champagne once again. I can't knowingly say they're back, but at this point let's say they're back. Let's have fun with it. Let's enjoy the ride, as a lot of people said in the offseason and going into this year. It's a young team, they're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna lose games to bad teams, but in the end they're still talented. They're maybe the most talented team in the Big Ten on paper. So yeah, let's go with it. The Illini are back.
Yeah, it's just a roller coaster ride that's probably going to continue until March, until the end of the season. But man, it's about time to just start building a little bit of momentum and consistency, and maybe these 2 games plus another home game coming up can be the catalyst to do that. And certainly I think there were some positive signs in terms of some scheme and emphasis things offensively that Illinois did, and some individuals that really bounced back here recently, and we can talk about all of that. I'll just start maybe by asking, we can kind of group these last 2 games together since we didn't record after the Minnesota game, but you beat Minnesota by 21, 95-74, your best offensive performance since early January, really since that Oregon game where you put 109 on Oregon and shot out of your mind. Everything was clicking offensively for Illinois. Then you come back against a red-hot UCLA team who had won 7 games in a row, was playing really good basketball, entered the top 25 of the net rankings as a quad one home win, and you really controlled the game. You did not trail. Offensively, again, a very solid night. Obviously, things stagnated late, but you get out of there and beat a good UCLA team. So what was the most encouraging thing about these last 2 wins for Illinois as it relates just to their future outlook in your mind?
I think the main thing, if you want to start with Minnesota, just the sheer lack of 3-point shooting attempts. I think it was 9 for 16, like a really low sample size, but they came out and made them. And I think a lot of that was putting an effort on getting to the basket and finding cutters, finding open guys in the lane, playing through Tomislav a little bit instead of just, taking 24 seconds on the shot clock, passing it around the top of the key, and then chucking a three from somebody and shooting 5 for 24 for the 10th time this year. Like, you just didn't see that against Minnesota. You didn't see that against UCLA. So that's now 2 games, your last 2 games after, we'll call it 10, maybe 15 games of pretty poor shooting nights, that you have really good, solid shooting nights, going 11 for 28 against UCLA. And yeah, it's just like, we came on here a couple days ago and it didn't seem like Illinois was going to change their game plan. Didn't seem like there was too much to be positive about in terms of the offense. It just seemed disjointed, like nothing was really working. Guys aren't cutting, guys aren't moving. And then you come out against Minnesota, and granted, you did get a huge Will Riley performance. Great game from KJ, great game from Tommy, but like overall, for the whole 40 minutes, pretty much, besides okay, maybe the first couple minutes, the offense just looked different. It wasn't stagnant. It was guys cutting, guys moving the ball around the top of the key, and then actually getting it into the paint and finding open guys with great passers like Tommy and even Ben and some other guys doing it inside the paint. And then UCLA was just, I thought, a really solid performance. The 3-point attempts went up a bit, which you'll live with if they're making them. But the issue the past month is they're not making them. They're going shooting 18% instead of around 40% like they did against UCLA. So I think it was super encouraging. Obviously, Minnesota is not a great team, but UCLA is a phenomenal defensive team. Top 10 in KenPom going into this game. I don't know where they're at right now, but with a 20, 25 game sample size, that's a great defensive team. And Illinois kind of got what they wanted, especially in the second half with KJ just doing his thing. KJ and Tommy during that run in the second half, kind of going back and forth, getting buckets here, getting to the line here. KJ hitting some really clutch shots, and then Will Riley doing his thing as well in the second half. So I thought it was just a really encouraging 80 minutes of offensive basketball, which we had not seen in nearly a month. And yeah, it gives me some hope that they can replicate this against some really good teams coming up and some really good teams in March, hopefully. Um, yeah, you got to stay consistent and not fall back. As soon as Illinois goes down, you can't fall back and start chucking up 36 three-point shots. You can't have Hummerkaus shooting 8 3-point shots a game at this point. I think you have to play through your guys that have now proven they can do it for the past couple weeks, and KJ and Will Riley and Tommy. Tommy, he's even hurt. He's playing at 80% maybe, and he's just been phenomenal the past two games. And yeah, I think the offense has just looked significantly better the past two games, and that's definitely encouraging.
Yeah, definitely. I think figuring out some of the offensive issues is what had to happen here if you wanted to feel pretty good going into this final stretch of the season where you're going to get Michigan State, Wisconsin, Purdue, Michigan, Duke. That's five of the Illini's last six games here, even UCLA, because like you mentioned, they were a top 10 defense coming into that game, and Illinois puts 1.32 points per possession on them after going, I think, close to 1.6 against Minnesota, which is like the 100th percentile outcome. We know that's always in there, probably won't happen more than once a month, but that's everything working for you. And then UCLA, yeah, there were some things that, late in the game, the final 4.5 minutes when UCLA came back and made it a lot more interesting than it should have been. I thought there was some stagnation offensively. Early in the game, I thought there was a little bit of settling. But for the middle part of that game, it just felt like there was a nice balance reached offensively that you really wanted to see with the three-point shooting. Minnesota was a concerted effort early in the game to attack and work inside out, and your guards attacked early, put the ball in Will Riley's hands, and instead of just rising up and shooting a contested jumper over guys, he was creating inside the paint. And then most of the threes you got there out of the 16 were really good in-rhythm looks, and there you go. You make 9 of them. You got your best shooters taking them, and you're placing more of an emphasis on the paint and on attacking and working your way out and spraying it out for better looks as opposed to just settling, stagnating around the perimeter. And that was really encouraging. But then you follow it up with the UCLA game with, yeah, you fell into the trap a little bit. And part of that is how UCLA's designed to guard you. I mean, they're a team that's in rotation all the time. They're a very aggressive defense that's going to fly around, and, they'll get exploited when guys are over helping from three because they place such an emphasis on trying to collapse the paint. But Illinois, even still, like early in the second half when they made their big run in that game to extend the lead to 16, there was an emphasis. Kylan Boswell gets to the free throw line a few times. KJ making plays around the rim, which during his slump, he was just settling. It was step back three or bust really for him. And he showed some creativity around the bucket. And I think Will's aggressiveness is really encouraging as well. But I think they've just kind of struck the right balance finally on offense to where it isn't just, we're going to hit our 3-point quota, but we're actually going to be a little bit more selective with the threes we're taking. Our best shooters are going to be the ones that are taking them. I want to get into a discussion later on about like the rotation changes that Brad Underwood has made, but the threes are going up from Tomislav Ivicic, Kasparis, Will Riley, Benham Rickhouse, and Kylan will take one here or there. Jake Davis has gotten a couple nice open in rhythm shots that he's knocked down. Those are your 3-point shooters. Like those are your high percentage guys. If you give those guys an in rhythm look where you're actually creating offensively, I think those are much higher percentage shots than some of the ones that bit Illinois against Nebraska that were just forced, and guys that just aren't proven 3-point shooters settling for tougher threes. And that's why you saw Illinois shoot 56% against Minnesota, 39% against UCLA. Those are their 2 best shooting games since Oregon. Part of that is probably just positive regression that was always going to happen because this team just wasn't that bad as a 24% shooting team. But part of it, I think, is some things that they've done offensively just to take, put less emphasis on the 3-point line and really just be a little bit more selective in terms of the shots that they are taking while placing a greater emphasis on attacking, driving, getting to the free throw line. There was a lot of free throw attempts that went up for Illinois this week. I think that's something that always needs to be a part of their offense. And now you look on KenPom, the funny thing is for pretty much 2 months, Illinois was hovering around like in between 25 and 35 offensively and right around the top 10 defensively. Now you look at their profile, you got a top 15 offense. You're 14th offensively and you're down to 30th defensively. And we can talk defense a little bit later because I do think there were some struggles against UCLA on that end. But now you're starting to see the offensive potential of this team break back through because ultimately that's always, where this team was going to make their money is a offensively dynamic team with a lot of options, a lot of shooters on the floor, really hard to guard, and you're starting to see that more now.
Yeah, and just really all it took was a simple adjustment. Like, I don't know if I said this last podcast or sometime in the past 2 weeks, basically saying Will Riley for a big stretch of the season was kind of limited to shooting corner threes and only taking threes and kind of out of rhythm threes instead of getting downhill and attacking the rim. And I was saying, like, as soon as he started doing that against, I think it was Nebraska, he started getting downhill, finding mismatches, and just really attacking the hoop instead of settling for deep threes. He started to look great. And that's been a huge key in this Illinois offense kind of waking up. And guess what? The rest of the team's doing that too. Like, I think it's really as simple as not settling for the garbage threes that we saw for pretty much a month straight, and actually having your athletes like Kyle and KJ and even Tommy and some other guys like just getting downhill and doing what they're good at instead of doing what they've been doing at a 24% clip, which is shooting tough threes. Like I really do think it's as simple as that. I think another aspect which is kind of interesting, Dre and Trey have kind of been out the past two games. It's correlated, or I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the 3-point shooting's been better. Those are two of your kind of weaker shooters, even though the whole team's been kind of weak for the most part. So that's something interesting too. Like as you mentioned, the just having your good 3-point shooters taking the 3-point shots, which is what Illinois has done the past couple games. So yeah, it's really not a shock, I don't think, that they've really stepped up offensively. It was just a question of whether or not they would switch up the game plan and start doing the things that they needed to be doing. So yeah, I think it's been super encouraging that they've done that the past two games. Um, Defensively, I thought they were phenomenal against UCLA. The first 15 minutes of that UCLA game, UCLA maybe had one or two good looks offensively. They could find nothing for like 25 seconds in the shot clock, and then they forced up a tough floater, a runner, and barely hit the front of the rim. Like that happened 10 times. And then the second half, Bilodeau got hot. He hit 7 threes. I thought it was really funny that on Kofi Coburn's return night, the two starting big men combined for 11 threes, which is just something you did not see for Kofi's 3 years here. But yeah, defensively it's fallen off a little bit, but I think it's going to continue to fall off probably with you're playing five top 20 teams in the next 5 or 6 games. But that's not something I'm super worried about because if this offense is playing at the level that they've been playing at, you're not going to need a top 15 defense because when KJ's on, when Will's on, when Tommy's doing what he's been doing, and if Tommy gets healthy, this is kind of the team we predicted after watching that Oregon game, after watching Indiana, after watching Wisconsin maybe, and in the offseason too. And yeah, like if your offense is just playing the way they've been playing, shooting around 35-40% from three even, it's a deadly team. It's a team that can go on a run as long as they don't have one of those stinker games shooting 15% from three. So yeah, I mean we said it for a while. Like if they switch up the game plan and stop shooting the contested 28 footers early in the shot clock, I think this is a team that can go on a run in March. And this is the team that we've seen for 2 games straight now.
Yeah, defensively, I think it's probably just a situation where I think this team's really good at doing what they do in terms of the scheme that Brad Underwood wants, trying to force teams into the mid-range. You force UCLA into 20 non-rim twos, they make 5 of them. Like that, you saw that against Ohio State. They were like insane. Like I forget what that number was. It was like 2 for 31 or something utterly insane. Illinois is going to have a floor to what they do there. I do think you've seen a little bit of a drop off on the perimeter, maybe not having Dre and Trey as much involved in the rotation. I think you've seen guards attack Illinois a little bit more off the bounce. And then the Bilodeau thing, yeah, I'm with you. Early in that UCLA game, I thought Illinois was spectacular defensively. In the second half, I thought there were some real issues. And the biggest issue was Bilodeau and his 3-point shooting. The fact that Illinois didn't really make the adjustment there They didn't really have the personnel to do it because you had Tommy or Merez out there, mainly Tommy at the 5, and he's just not comfortable, especially playing on one foot with his ankle all screwed up to go out and guard that unless you're going to fully switch it. And if you do that, then I think you're causing even more issues because then you're asking Tommy to really put pressure on that ankle. So I think Illinois was just hesitant to make a hard adjustment on that, even though Bilodeau is a really good three-point shooter. And I do think that this is a lineup now that Brad Underwood is going to with the bigs out there that can get exploited by stretch fives and stretch bigs. I think that's a really bad matchup for this Illinois team. The good news is Michigan State doesn't have one. Wisconsin, I mean, Stephen Crowell occasionally will shoot it. I'm not all that concerned if he takes 10 threes in that game. Purdue doesn't have one. Duke doesn't have one, although they play Cooper Flagg at the 5 and put him in a lot of screening action. So that could be a problem. We'll get to that game in a few weeks. There's going to be more than that problem in that matchup. But I think overall, like, this team's starting to revert back to the profile that you thought in terms of an offense that strikes more fear into teams than they were for a month, and a defense that's not going to be spectacular, not going to be the top 10 elite defense that they kind of profiled as for a while, but there's just going to be a solid floor. They're going to do the same things. And there's not going to be a whole lot of inconsistency defensively. I think that's kind of the ideal makeup of this team, and I do think that there have been moments where they have been really, really good on that end, like early in the UCLA game. I do want to mention, kind of, to throw it back to the original question, I think my biggest point of encouragement in these last 2 games is that you have started to establish your big 3, and your 3 most talented players are playing like your 3 best players, and all 3 of them are in a rhythm right now, playing some really good basketball. Kasparis has broken out of his slump that was prolonged, has had 2 great games against Minnesota and then UCLA. We saw the clutch shot maker. We saw the guy that was confident shooting those step-back shots, but we saw a guy that showed a lot of craftiness around the rim, controlled the game in the second half, and willed Illinois to victory as their leader. That guy is fully back now, and he's ditched the wrist wrap or whatever, and he looks like a new player since he ditched it. He's not even thinking about that anymore, and that was the number one thing that had to happen for Illinois to fix any problem. Number one started with Kasparis Yakuchonis being a all Big Ten level, borderline All-American level player again. Tomislav Ivicic is playing outstanding basketball right now, and I just want to mention that, I mean, this guy badly rolled his ankle, left the Rutgers game. Brad Underwood said he hasn't practiced one time since that Rutgers game, said his ankle was swollen up and looked like a Cabernet grape during the Minnesota game. He said last night that it was a little better, but it still isn't very good. And the guy is balling on it. The guy's playing 30 minutes on it, and he's playing really good basketball. He's found his three-point shot again, 6 for 8 from 3 the last 2 games. He's a guy that's acting as a hub offensively for Illinois, like we saw early in the year, where you can do a lot of things through him. His passing has been spectacular, finding cutters, allowing Illinois to change up some looks offensively with him as a primary playmaker on the perimeter. And I think he has just been outstanding. But then I think the biggest development is what you're getting from Will Riley right now, him stepping up to be that number 3 guy. And really, I mean, for the up until UCLA, he was your number 1 guy for a while there. But just him reaching his potential offensively and starting to realize that he's going to have size advantages on guys. He's 6'8", and he's a dynamic scorer, and he's not settling. He's not out of rhythm with the shots he's taking. He is commanding the game. He had 7 assists and 6 assists in back-to-back games before UCLA even chipped in 2 against UCLA as well. But he's attacking. He's using his size. He's showing some craftiness with his scoring around the bucket. He is turning into the scorer that we thought could be for this team, and a guy that really is at the top of the scouting report again, that teams really fear alongside Kasparis as the perimeter scoring options on this team. No longer do you just have one guy that you run everything through. Will's making himself the true number 2 to Kasparis in terms of a guy you can rely on offensively in a variety of different ways. And I just think in combination, those 3 guys stepping up to be your 3 star players, those were the 3 ceiling raisers that all the time. I mean, you got two first round talents in Kasparis and Will. Those guys needed to play like first round talents. And then you mix in Tommy, who's such a unique, skilled big man who opens up so much. And if those three are all playing their best basketball at the same time, that is the Final Four version of Illinois. And to see all three of those guys really come into their own here and play well, I think is the most encouraging thing to me. And that doesn't mean you don't still need Kylan and Ben and DGL and Jake Davis, Trey White to contribute, but those guys are your role players. Those guys are your guys that are, going to chip in here, chip in there. These three are your stars that you need to ride with heading into March, and I think they're all playing awesome.
No question about it. I wrote an article saying that exact same thing, I think, within the past 2 weeks, basically saying it's time for Illinois to start rewarding the young guys. Like you can throw Dre and Merez in there too. I think with obviously with KJ and Big T and Will Riley, when those guys are at their best, Illinois is at their best. Those are three of your most impactful players, no question. But even including Dre and Merez, like when those guys are at their best, I think that lineup is potentially a Final Four lineup, as you were kind of saying. And yeah, at the same time, you're not going to just get rid of Kylan Boswell and Hummerkaus and Trey White when they're all healthy. They're crucial pieces too. Like I want to see them more in a supplemental role as more role players instead of starters and guys that are high usage guys taking 10 shots a game. I think that should be the young guys and the young core that Illinois built, and we're finally starting to see them really play well all together at the same time, which has been the reason Illinois is winning. Well, yeah, like Will Riley asserting himself, as you said, doing stuff, going downhill, really good with the ball in his hands. There were questions about him like handling the ball and, turnover issues, physicality issues. He's finally starting to put those to bed and just dominating his matchup. Like he did it against UCLA without shooting threes, which had been one of his big issues earlier in the year. He's just getting downhill. He's getting what he wants. KJ's starting to do the same thing again. Um, Finally healthy, I'm assuming, and he's starting to go downhill, which is just when Illinois is at their best too. He's a great three-point shooter, can be reliant on the step back and other tough shots at times, but when he's downhill, it opens up so much, including Big T rolling and Big T popping and other guys popping, including Hummerkaus and Boswell. Like that's when they get their most open looks and finally start to make them. So yeah, I think relying on KJ and Big T and Will Riley, that's when Illinois is at their best, and that's what we've seen finally in the past two games. And I really want to continue to see that, even as the competition gets tougher. You're going to have ups and downs just relying on 18-year-olds, even if they're first-round draft picks, when they're playing against top 20 teams, including Duke and Purdue and Michigan State again. There's going to be turnovers, as you've seen with KJ. There's going to be some tough shots that Will Riley misses, bad looks. Big T's probably going to have mistakes here and there, but I think just you want to play to the ceiling of this team. Like we're not in December anymore. We're in February. It's mid-February. You got 5 or 6 regular season games left. It's the dog days of Big Ten play. Like I think we're at a point where you need to see Illinois just rely on their best guys, and I think the best guys are going to give them the best chance to win in March in the tournament and in these next couple games against really good teams. So yeah, I'm happy that Brad Underwood has started to make an adjustment. I don't need to see Will Riley in the starting lineup. I think he maybe put Dre back in there when he's healthy and just get these veterans in role positions and just not doing as much as they were doing back in December and January. Because I just think Illinois found the best thing for the team, which is less 3-point shots. The best 3-point shooters are taking the 3-point shots. And then all in all, you're relying on KJ and Will Riley and Big T, probably your three best players to get you through and just beat the best teams remaining on the schedule.
Yeah, so building off of that a little bit, I do want to talk about some of the rotational stuff because we haven't seen any of Trey White the last two games. He played 40 seconds against Minnesota and was basically your designated hacker. I mean, he came in and fouled a couple times, and that was it for him. And then he gets a DNP against UCLA. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn barely plays against Minnesota and plays 4 minutes against UCLA. Now, the full context of that is obviously Trey White was unavailable for the Rutgers game with an illness. That was officially revealed. And Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn was out of practice on Friday with an illness and was questionable to even make the trip to Minnesota. So it probably shouldn't have been that surprising that he barely ended up seeing the floor there. And Brad Underwood said after the UCLA game that there just hasn't been a lot of practice and stuff. I personally think though that it's not just as simple as, well, these guys have been sick and so they're not going to play tonight. I think there is a shortening of the rotation going on. I think there's some conscious decision making going on. That's not to say that Trey White and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn are going to get DNPs the rest of the year. I think they're both going to be in the rotation more than they have, and the illness has played a part of that. But I mean, it's been a week ago now since Trey White was sick, and he looked totally fine. He came out and warmed up in full, and I mean, there wasn't an inkling of him not looking right prior to the UCLA game. And you know, the flu going around, it's not one that knocks you out for a full week. I think Dre obviously was sick a little earlier than that, but he came in and played for a few stints in that UCLA game. I just think Brad Underwood's riding his top guys right now, and it just made it easier to do that. You were forced to do that with guys being ill, but now it's more so a hesitancy to say, okay, I want to get my best shooters on the floor because we've struggled so much shooting the ball. And let's face it, Trey White being out there with Marez Johnson is not a very good shooting lineup, one that allows Illinois to do what they want to do offensively and open up the paint for their guys to continue attacking, playing inside out. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is one of your worst shooters. Now, he was playing really well. I think he'll be in the rotation again here pretty shortly. But I think it's more so, to me, a trimming of this rotation more than just, okay, they're sick, we're not playing them tonight. I think, you know, if we saw Tomislav Ivicic hasn't practiced in 2 weeks, or hadn't practiced in a week, with an ankle that's swollen up like a grape, and he's out there playing 32 minutes because he's that important and he's a guy you want. If those two guys were guys that Brad Underwood felt were irreplaceable parts of the rotation that he really desperately wanted to play, I think they would have been playing more than they have the last two games. So I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you buy that it's maybe more of a rotational chop than it's being portrayed as? And if so, how do you feel about that in terms of those two guys maybe falling out of minutes a little more?
All right. With Trey White, I could totally see that. And I'm not saying I'm totally all for it, but I see where Brad Underwood's coming from, and I don't really mind it as a fan and as a guy that wants his team to win games. With Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, I could maybe see it, but I don't think it's totally the reason that he's not playing. I could totally see him still being sick. And I think he was playing his best basketball before he got sick. Like, he was dominant at getting to the hoop, which is what Illinois has been dominant at the past two games. So I don't know why you wouldn't necessarily want that out there. I guess he is a 25% three-point shooter or whatever he is. But yeah, with Trey White, I just think with Will Riley emerging, and Hummerkaus isn't playing terrible. You got Jake Davis giving you solid minutes in that wing forward group. I don't mind seeing Trey White slide to the eighth man, ninth man in the rotation, not getting 1 minute a game and being your foul guy, but less than 10 minutes, maybe 10 minutes a game. He just doesn't give you anything shooting wise. He's a solid perimeter defender. I'll give him that. But then even offensively, like, he's not really a guy that fully gets to the rim. He's more of a mid-range guy, taking some awkward shots, which Illinois can live with at times. But when they're doing so many good things in the paint and starting to shoot well from three, I don't think it's a guy that you need out there for 25 minutes a night and starting like we saw for about 20 games. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I really don't mind it either. But with Dre, like I said, I just said a minute ago, I think he was doing really well before he got sick. I could see a little bit of hesitancy from Brad Underwood, deciding not to play him for 15, 20 minutes a night the past two games. But I don't fully see Dre's going to be the eighth man in the rotation playing 5 minutes a game like he was last year. I think Dre does enough good things, especially defensively, and then obviously getting to the hoop pretty easily offensively. I think he does enough where he's still a really key piece to this rotation. Um, I don't know if he's going to regain that starting role that he had over Kylan Boswell for a couple game stretch, but I do think he's still a very valuable piece to this rotation. So I for sure want to keep him in the rotation, and I think Brad Underwood will.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree on that in terms of I think Trey's minutes are in more danger long term than Dre's are. I'd be shocked if Dre's, getting DNPs at any point, once he's fully back and conditioned and healthy, because I do think he is just that energy guy. I do think he's probably better suited to come off the bench more so than start, but I think he is going to be a guy that factors in. I do just think with the emergence of Will Riley and the fact that Trey wasn't giving you a whole lot before he was sick, he's the guy that you kind of circle and say, okay, if Brad Underwood's going to ride Casparis, Tommy, and Will for 32 plus minutes a night each, and we know that Kylan and Ben are guys that are going to garner heavy minutes and are guys he trusts. Trey's the guy you circle and say, okay, it's going to come at the expense of him probably more than anybody else, just because I do think his lack of shooting makes him a tough fit in a lot of lineups in terms of what Illinois ultimately wants to accomplish offensively, especially when you want to do some 5-out stuff with Big T. Now that's not to say Trey can't help that as a cutter, as a guy who is a little bit more physical of a driver, and somebody who I think is one of Illinois' most explosive transition threats as well. And you talk about perimeter defense being a struggle here recently for Illinois. He's somebody who can help that, especially against longer wings. So I think there's going to be matchups where he's going to make an impact, and I do think that he's not a guy I expect to get DNPs consistently, but I do think he's one of those guys that he's got to really earn it now down the stretch. If Will's going to play like this, it's just going to be tough for him to crack that 20-minute mark. And I think that's just kind of the natural progression of the season that we always see with Brad Underwood teams and really most teams in college basketball. You get to March and you're riding with your top 7 or 8. We saw it last year. That team was a little shallower than this year's team in general, but you got Terrence Shannon out there 38 minutes. Damask isn't leaving the floor. Coleman's not leaving the floor. And then you sprinkle in, Ty here, Quincy there, Justin Harmon and Dane here, and that's about it, and you didn't get a whole lot from other guys. You shortened things. And I think that's ultimately what Brad Underwood is going to want to do going into March here is he's going to have his guys that he doesn't want to take off the floor unless they're in foul trouble. And those guys are Illinois' younger, higher upside NBA talents. And Trey White, while he can give this lineup some things that they don't have, isn't that. And so he is one where I wouldn't be surprised if we really see his role lessened. And for Dre, I think I expect him to be a part of this rotation. I'm not sure I expect him to be the part that he was for that couple game stretch there where he's, a starter playing 30 minutes. I just think he's going to be more of those, mix and match lineups, complementary piece, 6 energy minutes here type of guy. But I just found that interesting because I don't think it's entirely just, well, those two guys are sick as soon as they're back, they're back to where they were. I think there's starting to be some rotational decisions made from Underwood here. And I'll ask you too, briefly, what do you make of this starting lineup that we've seen the last 2 games? It's been another new starting lineup for Brad Underwood. Illinois played great offensive basketball with it. And it's a very big lineup. You got Ben Humricka sliding down to the 3, Merez Johnson, Tomislav Ivicic in your front court with Kasparis and Kylan in the backcourt. Is that a lineup you think can be Illinois' March starting 5?
It is massive. I mean, Hummerkaus as the 3 at what, 6'9"? It's crazy, honestly. But yeah, I mean, Merez isn't a shooter, so Ben at the 3 gives you a ton of shooting, a really solid spacing in your starting lineup. So yeah, I don't mind it. I guess I think I do kind of agree with you with Underwood making the point that maybe Dre is not going to be inserted back into the starting lineup. So obviously you're going to have KJ and Tommy. I think Boswell's fine in the starting lineup. I just want to see him more as a role player instead of 10, 15 shots a night. And then that leaves, yeah, I want to see Merez out there. I think Merez hasn't been as impactful the past couple games, but that's kind of matchup dependent. He's had some issues, I guess, but I want to see him out there for 20 plus minutes a night, and I think him in the starting lineup is a great idea. And then yeah, that leaves Hummerkaus at the 3. I'm fine with Will Riley coming off the bench, as I said. So that kind of just leaves Hummerkaus at this point because you're not going to start Jake Davis or a Trey White who's not getting as many minutes as he used to. So yeah, it's really an interesting lineup, but I don't mind it at all. I think it's kind of just what Illinois has to do at this point in the season. Yeah, I think the two big lineup of Mraz and Tommy's really efficient. I love seeing them out there at the same time. I like seeing Tommy at the top of the key running things at times. Obviously, I love when KJ's running things in the pick and roll and the pick and pop with Tommy. And then yeah, that leaves if those two get going early, that leaves Hummerkaus wide open in the corner, wide open in the wing, taking a nice shot and making it. So yeah, I'm totally fine with it, and I do think that gives Illinois a really good chance to start some games early and start some games by either getting downhill pretty easily with KJ and Tommy and even Boswell, or on the other hand, if that's maybe not working, you still have Ben Hummerkaus in the starting lineup, and he's a guy that can get you a three at any point, along with KJ and Tommy at the same time. So yeah, I think it gives you good rebounding as well with Merez and Tommy at the 4 and 5 too. Hummerkaus has started to crash the glass a little bit more, coming flying in from the corner like Jake Davis and Will Riley have done at times. So yeah, I like it. I think it does give Illinois a solid chance to just start games hot and win some games down the stretch.
I like it too. I think you should roll with this for as long as you can, and as long as it's working for you. I agree with you. I think Will Riley's playing starters minutes. I mean, he's a de facto starter. He's just not starting the game. And I know some people, and I even said it in the past. I'm like, I just probably start the guy. I mean, I'd be okay if they did that. At this point, he's in such a rhythm right now that just don't mess with anything. If he's comfortable coming off the bench, leave him off the bench. He's still going to close games for this team. Probably he's still going to play starters minutes for this team. That is what it is. I do like the starting group though, because I think it gives Illinois a lot of size advantages. And that was one of the strengths of this team coming into the season that Brad talked about back on media day. Positional size is what they targeted. And boy, you've got it in that starting lineup. And you saw Illinois take advantage of it in these last couple games, particularly against Minnesota, when you've got Humrickhouse and you throw the little booty ball wrinkle in there when he's got a 6'6" guy on him and you can play off of that. Will Riley, when he's all of a sudden comes off the bench and gets inserted with that bigger lineup, he's got guards on him. That's where you've seen him really get a lot more confident attacking, using his height and size to score on guys as opposed to just relying on his shot making ability. And I think you want those matchups as much as you can get them. KJ obviously is a guy who can utilize his size, and when you got the two bigs out there, boy, you're going to be tough to keep off the glass. And Merez is going to get a lot of offensive rebounding opportunities when Tommy's spaced out, and you're going to get opportunities for either of those guys to post up smaller defenders. There's going to be some drawbacks to that if you get matchups with teams that are a little bit more explosive on the perimeter, that play a little smaller, do some 4-out stuff where you can pull Merez away and make him really move his feet. You can, put a quicker, more explosive athlete across from Ben Rickhouse who can take him off the bounce. That's where you'll probably have to make some of the adjustments to maybe it's a heavier Trey White night or Dre. But I think you roll with this, and I think you found something here offensively. Especially you've started both games really well offensively and gotten off the leads. Or I mean, Minnesota couldn't miss early in the game, but your offense was scoring it well, and then you got off to a nice lead against UCLA. I like it. I think it's a unique little wrinkle that Brad Underwood threw in there, kind of by necessity because of the illnesses, and now I don't think there's any reason to mess with it. So I'm with you. I think it gives Illinois a lot of advantages, puts guys in a lot of advantageous spots. Anything else here from the last two games, or we can talk Michigan State? Anything else of note, either from UCLA? Oh, let's talk. Here's something, because we talked about this before we started. Sky Clark returns to Champaign, and we don't need to talk about that all that much, but more so, I think the environment was very notable against UCLA, and that's something that we talked about earlier on the podcast in terms of just State Farm Center maybe not having as much juice as it's had. It sure had some juice with UCLA coming to town. Sky Clark heard it all night. You had Kofi back in town, and I think it's been a nice little string here of State Farm Center environments. The Crush has been on fire. I think there's been some improvements made here, and Illinois played a lot better at home here recently and taking care of business. What do you think?
Oh, you know my thoughts, man. I really don't know how much I've said it on here, but you just know me personally. Like, I have been a long time critic of the Orange Crush. I just think as a student, it's not like I was at the Purdue game, the biggest game of the year. I think it was a 6 or 7 o'clock tip. I got there at noon. I was out there for 7 hours. And there were like 30 people ahead of me in line when I got there. And then all of a sudden, it's like tip-off time, or it's the time when the gates open. And I'm like the 200th person in line, like people just cutting the line. I got like a sixth row seat behind the basket. I'm like, I've been out here freezing my ass off for 7 hours. So I just thought there were issues as a student. And then as a fan and as a supporter of the team, like there are just games where there's stretches of 20, 25 minutes where it's dead silent in the arena. I thought against Tennessee, like there were 3 minutes left. I'm in the upper bowl in the 200s. I was the only person standing in my section. It is the number one team in the country with 3 minutes left. I think Illinois was up too. There were like five people in the 200 level standing. But all that to say, against Ohio State, it was much better. Like for the first time all year, I heard students in the crush behind the benches, sorry, actually like yelling and heckling players, which I think it's awesome. Yeah, it's a bit rude, but like it's college basketball. It's drunk 20-year-olds. There has to be more energy in the Orange Crush, dude. And then against UCLA, obviously with Sky Clark, there were conversations on Twitter saying, the past month saying, yeah, the Orange Crush needs to step up, be more energetic. And then the 2 days before the game, people are saying, Sky Clark is just a kid. Let's not boo him. Like, what the hell are we talking about? It, I don't know. Like you can't yell at the Crush for the past month saying be more energetic, and then say Sky Clark doesn't deserve our booing and our hate. And so I was at the game and I was there like an hour before tip off, and I was a bit worried because there were only like four kids in the shoot around booing Sky Clark every time he missed a shot. But then as soon as the game started, the starting lineup intros, he was getting just harassed, which as a fan, like I don't mind it, man. So yeah, I think they were much better the past two games. I like to see the Orange Crush actually standing up and fixing some issues with just energy and like the pregame tickets and all that stuff. So definitely got to give props to the Orange Crush because I've been a hater for quite some time.
It just has felt noticeably better here the last like three games since the whole, social media backlash was coming across, which I do think was valid. And the thing I'll say about the Sky Clark situation is like I could not echo what you said more. How can you on one hand say, well, the Orange Crush sucks. The environment isn't what it used to be. We need to do better as a fan base at State Farm Center. And then a day before, an old player who quit on your program in the middle of the season and then posted a commitment edit to his next school 2 minutes after you lost in the NCAA tournament comes back 2 years later to the State Farm Center. We've got people saying, well, we shouldn't. Let's be nice. He said good things to Trey White to get him to come to Illinois, so we'll be nice here. How can you say both of those things simultaneously? If you want to be an imposing student section environment, this is the type of stuff that happens. I didn't hear anything like nasty come. That's nothing I ever condone, but it was the college student section, chanting, I saw a picture somebody posted of, 55, 5 schools in 5 years, Sky's a quitter chants. Like that's what you're asking for, right? And I thought that made an impact on the game. Like it was a heck of an environment. It was extra juiced up. And, to just characterize it as well, it's a kid who transferred. He quit on the team. Like let's remember what happened there. There's a different context to his departure as opposed to Coleman Hawkins and Luke Goody, who I don't think would have gotten booed and chanted and heckled if they came back. He quit on the program middle of the season. So fair game on that stuff. I thought, for people that had an issue with it, I just don't understand that. If someone heard something like nasty and vicious, obviously that stuff probably shouldn't happen. But in terms of the chanting, like, yeah, that's what you're asking for. And I think the environment's been good. So I fully echo everything you said. Let's close out with Michigan State here, which is the next opponent for Illinois, the second game on this very crucial two-game homestand, and a highly anticipated rematch. We all know what happened. The first meeting in East Lansing, Kasparis Yakachonis plays 8 minutes thanks to getting Jeffrey Anderson. in that one, and Illinois ultimately has a chance to win in the final 10 seconds and doesn't get a shot up. Kylan Boswell throws it out of bounds. Michigan State holds on for a 2-point victory. That was an undefeated Michigan State team in conference. Now they've got 3 losses and are no longer even in any possession of first place. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. They're coming back down to earth a little bit here. It's still a team that ranks pretty highly, but they're outside of the top 20 on KenPom now at 21. Their metrics have taken a hit here. They just have not played very well here recently. Even their one win in the last 4 at home against Oregon, they trailed by 14 at halftime to a reeling Oregon team. So this is a Michigan State team going through some things, unlike when Illinois saw them the first time and they were rolling and blowing teams out. This team's got some issues right now, and I'll be honest, it's more so the version I expected. I didn't expect this team to win the Big Ten. I didn't expect this team to be a top 10 team in the country. That's not to call them a total fraud, overrated team, but I think this is, it's a team that I don't think ultimately, when things finish here this season, is going to be viewed as that, juggernaut that they were when Illinois was about to see them the first time, and still can't shoot the 3 at all. One of the worst shooting teams in the country, and they've had some illnesses here recently too, but just not playing well right now, and you feel like you're getting them at a pretty good time here, and I think Illinois is going to have a sour taste in their mouth from the first matchup, and you'd anticipate a electric atmosphere on Saturday night for Terrence Shannon night and Tom Izzo coming to town, and everything that happened in that first matchup, which was about the most frustrating loss of the season for Illinois. I'm excited about it. What are you expecting here in this rematch?
First of all, KJ to play more than 8 minutes, the Orange Crush to be standing the whole game. I think it's going to be a phenomenal atmosphere. TSJ, I mean, obviously the best player on the last 2 teams, a fan favorite for all the things he went through and all the things he gave Illinois. And then, yeah, just a huge game in the Big Ten and the whole scope of this season. So it's Tom Izzo coming to Champaign. I think it's going to be electric, and I think it's going to be a really good game that I do think Illinois is going to win this time around. But yeah, the first game, you had KJ just not play. At the post-game press conference yesterday, somebody asked him if Michigan State's like circled on his schedule as a game he really wants to a team he really wants to play again, and he kind of he had a smirk and kind of started laughing. I don't even know what he said after that, but you kind of know that he's gonna give it his all and he's gonna be ready for this one. I do think as we just hyped up the starting lineup that we've seen the past 2 games, I think this could be an interesting game with. Michigan State's kind of a wing heavy and guard heavy team. They do have a solid group of bigs. But if you're going to have like Boswell and KJ on Jeremy Fears and Jaden Akins, that kind of leaves Humrick House on like Cohen Carr or Jace or Richardson or whoever else you want to put in that starting lineup. So I think that's a bit intriguing and could be a bit of an issue for Illinois defensively. But then at the same time, offensively, you have a huge positional size matchup there at the 3. So I think it's a game Illinois wins. I don't think it's that surprising that Michigan State's fallen off a little bit as the competition level has raised up. But yeah, it's still a good team, like you said. It's still a team that's maybe a second weekend team, just probably not a Final Four team, as some people thought when they were 10-0 in conference. But yeah, I think Illinois comes out and wins this one. I think it has to be just a passionate, energetic night from the fans and obviously the team. Welcoming back TSJ. So I think, like, I don't have much game plan wise. You saw what happened in the first game. KJ wasn't there for 32 minutes, and Illinois still stuck around, still had a shot at the end, as you said, with Boswell. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a really good game once again.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good one. I do think it like KJ. I think he's gonna have a chip on his shoulder, and he's gonna score like 8 points before the under 16 timeout. Like he just gives off that like quiet. I'm not gonna like say anything here, but there's gonna be that look in his eye. I think. Yeah, there should be some frustration after that first game. I think the number one key to this one is your best player play more than 8 minutes, and you'll have a better chance. That's number one. I expect that to happen at the State Farm Center. At least I would hope so. And KJ obviously has a part in that as well, keeping himself on the floor. This team is just abysmal from three, Michigan State. They're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. You got to go under every screen other than one set for Jace Richardson, in my opinion. Like that's the only guy on that roster that you should be going over, trying to fight over a screen for. Everybody else, you live with threes. Like Illinois is a team that wants to take away the 3-point line, wants to force you into the mid range. That's fine, and you still live with that, but this Michigan State team wants to take mid-range jumpers. Like, that's all they can make, really, and in terms of shooting the ball. And Fiddler can do that. Holloman can do that. Fears likes to get to there. Jaden Akins lives in the mid-range. Like, I want to force these guys behind the 3-point line as much as possible. I want to overhelp off of everybody. They play two bigs a lot. They play Cohen Carr and Fiddler, who are shooting like 10% from three combined. Like that. That's where Illinois needs to make an adjustment, I think, defensively, to where I think there was just a little bit of unnecessary over aggressiveness defensively in the first matchup, to where, if he wants to, come over the top of Jeremy Fears wants to come over the top of a screen and you're going 5 feet under it and pull up for three, you live with that shot. If some of these guys that just have not hit from three, make them make threes on you, because they just haven't done it, nor do they want to take those. Illinois' got to be better on the perimeter in terms of containing dribble drives with, Holloman toasted Boswell in the first matchup. That was one where you were surprised to see that. And maybe it is a game where Dre gets back into the thick of things, because Michigan State does have guards who want to attack and get downhill and create. So you might need more of a perimeter, quicker, laterally defender in there if you're going to play that big lineup. But at the same time, I think Illinois caused Michigan State some issues offensively with their bigs, and Tomislav was huge in that first game, and these Michigan State bigs are very unathletic, and they struggle to come out and guard. Tommy's probably going to get some looks up from three, but also some of the passing that he showed in that first matchup, where you play him in kind of a three-man action with a guard and Merez just uses his athleticism to beat a guy like Jackson Kohler and go up and get a ball. And now if you have KJ out there, it makes it even more deadly if you want to put those three in three-man actions. But you got KJ who can come off and bury a three in your face, get to a pull-up shot or drive it, as opposed to Boswell, who was kind of going through it in the first matchup. You're even more dangerous there. So I just think Illinois is well equipped for this rematch. I think there were a lot of things to like in that first matchup. I thought they actually guarded in transition pretty damn well, which is the one thing you have to do. You have to keep Michigan State out of transition. You have to pick up the ball off of misses and even off of makes when Fears is getting it down the floor running. You got Akins and Carr on either side of him trying to go up for a lob. I thought other than a couple times in the second half, Illinois actually was good there. It was an even rebounding battle the first time. I do think you need to clean up some things on the defensive glass, because Michigan State had some offensive rebounds that were key in the second half. But I think Illinois is catching this team at a good time. If you force them into some uncomfortable things offensively, which they've really gone through it here recently, they can't shoot it. They've been in the 60s a lot here recently. I think Illinois set up well here. And I think, if Kasparis is out there, we saw him slice and dice him for the 8 minutes he was out there. I think Michigan State's going to have a tough time, and Illinois just needs to keep the same mentality offensively in terms of driving it, playing inside out, not settling, because that's something they did do in the second half there in East Lansing. Some poor threes. You got to cut those out. But I feel pretty good about this one, to be honest with you. I think Illinois is going to have some revenge on their mind here.
Yeah, I feel great about it too. And as you just said, Illinois' offensive game plan is still a huge key to this game. You can't come out just because you've been pretty hot the past two games. You can't come out and start chucking threes as you did the past month. You still got to get downhill, even though Michigan State has a really solid defense on the interior too. Like Jackson Kohler's a great defender, great rebounder, and they have just some guys, some long guys in their wing group and in their big group that can, pose problems for Illinois. But I do think in the end, Illinois has the better downhill players in KJ and Boswell when they're out there. And Will Riley did that in the first matchup against Michigan State. He got really hot by, I think, made a couple threes, but then also got in the paint and took advantage of some mismatches. And that was kind of his coming out game, because he'd been just not a great offensive player for the past 8 games, the 8 games before that. So I think it's another potentially really solid matchup for him. And yeah, I just think Illinois has the talent edge. They're at home this time. It's a huge night with TSJ, and it's just a huge night to gain momentum again and keep momentum and really start to get yourself back into this Big Ten picture in terms of not winning the conference, obviously, but getting a double bye in the Big Ten tournament and really starting to shape up your March resume for the NCAA tournament, which is lacking a bit in terms of actual resume wins. Obviously, the metrics and Ken Pom and Torvik and all those things are really good, but the actual resume side still needs some work. Needs some work if you want to be a top 4 or 5 seed in the tournament. And yeah, I think this is a huge opportunity for Illinois to sustain momentum and get a huge win against a Michigan State program that's really good and has still had a good season. So I think Illinois wins this one. I don't want to say comfortably, but I think it's a good game, a really entertaining game. But I think they win like 84-75, I'll say. I think they get a comfortable win and knock off a solid Michigan State team that's been reeling the past couple games, but just an important game for Illinois, and I think they get a really crucial win.
Yeah, it's just important to take care of these home games. When you get these home opportunities against quality opponents, you can't let them slip away. You already have two disappointing home losses this year. Tennessee obviously they were number one at the time, but USC and Maryland were disappointing home losses that a national contender should not be dropping at home. Now you got to take care of the top teams in the league at home when you get this chance. You got the Minnesota game as kind of your get-right game, and now here we go. It's a gauntlet of a schedule down the stretch, but you got a favorable draw in that you started it with 2 home games, and you just can't afford to let those opportunities slip away. And just to build some real confidence and momentum heading down the stretch of the season to where it's not, well, we lose another one. You go 1-1 this week, and it's here's the roller coaster again. Another great performance one night, and then a dud the next night, and feels like the issues are fixed this night, and then you come back the next night, and here's the same problems again. That was the pattern for a month, and hopefully this team is snapping out of it and can build a little bit of consistency just with their approach offensively and with their top 3 guys playing well. That's just all I hope to see here. And I think if you're the team that Illinois fans and we think this team can be, you don't lose these home games. You took care of UCLA. Now take care of a Michigan State team that's not playing well and see what happens when you tip it up at Wisconsin and Duke next week and have some real momentum going into those games. But I agree. I think Illinois gets this one done. I think Michigan State will be in the game. I don't think Illinois runs them out of the gym or anything like that. I think it'll go similarly to a lot of Illinois' wins this year, where Illinois controls the game, but maybe things get dicey at one point. There's a stretch where Michigan State makes a run, Illinois stagnates. Ultimately, Illinois prevails in the end. I'll go Illinois 85, Michigan State 79. Nice little 6-point win there. I'd imagine that's right around where the spread will be in this game, 5.5, 6-ish in Illinois' favor. So I'll go with that here. Anything else before we close it out? Any parting thoughts?
That's pretty much it. Just where the season's really caught up on us. Like we're in the stretch run of it now. Conference tournaments start in like less than 3 weeks, I believe. It's crazy that we're already here. And Illinois is finally starting to look like a team that could go on a little run here. So I'm all for it. I'm happy to be talking to you guys a couple times a week. And yeah, go Illini.
Yeah, we really will try to be multiple times a week here for the most part down the stretch of the season because it's big game after big game. Next week is the biggest week of the season in terms of quality of opponent at Wisconsin and then Duke. So we'll try to get as much content as we can out on those 2 games. That Duke game is going to be one to preview for sure. That Duke team is very scary, but also what a win opportunity. That's one where you talk about jump up 2 seed lines with 1 win, beating this Duke team on a neutral floor. So I can't wait for that game. And then the last week of the season at Michigan, Purdue at home. Michigan now in sole possession of first place in the conference. Purdue, I think, still is my pick to win the conference, at least share it. And I think they're the best team in the league. So those are going to be 2 huge games. And you throw Iowa in there, hopefully we're talking about a 120-point explosion for Illinois against that team because they can't guard anybody. But we'll have a lot of content here in the rest of February into March as we approach the tournament, Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament. Make sure you give us a follow at Champagne on Ice on Twitter. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel. Find us wherever else you get your podcasts as well. Hope everybody enjoys the game on Saturday night. If you're going, I expect it to be an awesome atmosphere. TSJ is back for the first time since last season, and Tom Izzo and the Spartans are in town. That should be fun. So enjoy the game, everybody. We will talk to you afterwards right here on the Champagne on Ice podcast.